Jim Barnett for Warriors TV. Very fortunate today to have new General Manager Bob Myers as our guest just days before this year's draft. And Bob, I want to go back a little bit because 14 months ago, April of 2011, all of a sudden you become the Assistant General Manager of this club and the Vice President of Basketball Operations. You had been an agent before. Then a year later, April 2012, you are the GM. It's been one incredible year that has changed your life, hasn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it has. It really has. About a year ago, I was recruiting players for the draft, trying to get signed, and in meetings, and then all of a sudden, got a call from Joe, and he wanted me to come on board. Joe Lacob, our owner, and it's been a whirlwind, really. Dream come true for me to come back and work for the team I grew up cheering for, and it's just exciting, Jim. It really is.
Well, it's a big responsibility for you now. The draft coming up, this is your first NBA draft. How do you feel about that?
I feel good. I feel like it's a chance to help our team improve. And we've got great people in our organization, and it starts with the ownership, Joe Lacob and Peter Guber, and guys like Jerry West, and everybody's got some good advice and good counsel, and I'm not afraid to listen to it. So I think amongst the group, I think we'll make some good decisions here in the next couple days.
Well, I think things have been going in the right direction. First of all, you have to be very happy and fortunate that you retained your number 7 pick.
Oh yeah, that was, you know, it gives us an opportunity again to improve our team, but that was hanging in the balance, as you know. Very, very touch and go whether we're going to keep that pick or not, and relied on some lady luck to make that happen. And one step was a coin flip, and the next step was a lottery ball, and here we are. And I think we'll get a good player there at that number.
Yeah, it's kind of a crapshoot because Anthony Davis from Kentucky, the consensus #1 overall pick. But then you go, and maybe it depends on a team's needs, but you can go 2 through 10 or 2 through 12, and you really don't know who's going to be there at 7. You might be pleasantly surprised. You might be disappointed in that if you have a player picked, pigeonholed. Well,
I think you're right on that point. I think you all you line them all up and you rank them on the board, and you hope you did your best to get that right. And if you look at the history of drafts, you don't ever get it exactly right. And take away this organization, look at any organization, and look at the history of who should have been picked first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and it's never exactly as it should be. So you do your best. You watch film. You talk to the college coaches. You talk to the agents a little bit, although they will tell you how great their client is and how bad all the other players are. But you do your work. You meet as a group, and ultimately you rank the players, and that's what you do. And so you do all your work before the draft. I think if you're sitting there on draft night making snap decisions, that's not the way to go. So we'll have all the players ranked on how we feel like and who we feel like fits best within our team, and then whoever's there, that's who we'll take.
You know, you were an agent. You talked about how maybe you downplay. Were there kind of cat and mouse games where you would try to hide a player, or you know, perhaps Rick Pitino back with the Celtics when he was coaching there said he really didn't like Paul Pierce, and so they were able to get him at the number 10 pick. Do those things go on? But are today, with all the workouts scheduled around the league, it's probably hard to not expose a player and his abilities.
Well, I think there's some of that does go on, Jim. I think some of the kind of deception that is practiced, whereas let's try to get a player to fall to us. I do think that some of that goes on. I have a hard time just personally being taking that approach. It's just harder for me, but it does happen. It's harder for me to outright say something that I don't believe or don't feel, but it does happen. I'm more inclined to, if I think something is something we should keep in-house, I just won't say it. So I'll practice more omission than actually going out of my way to mislead. But it does happen. That's why I think you have to be careful when you rely on the public statements that are made, or even some private statements that are made to you during the draft, because ultimately you never really know what the teams around you are doing. Thankfully, in a business like ours within the NBA, and you played in the NBA, it's a small fraternity, so you get to know certain people.
Right.
Whereas if you tell me something, I can pretty much rely on that, knowing who you are and who you are as a person in our relationship. Now, if somebody that I haven't had as much experience with tells me something, I can rely on that to a certain extent. And subsequently, there's people that you know may say something and you just say, this person has a history of misleading, so I'm really going to discount that. So A lot of it is filtering information.
Yeah, and you've got to build trust with people.
For sure.
You know, this is a very young team. Is there a possibility, and have you had inquiries where you might trade that number 7 pick for an established player who's already been in the league?
Yeah, absolutely. We've had discussions surrounding that possibility. And again, anything that we decide as a group will be, in our opinion, for the betterment of the team, whether short-term, long-term, whatever it may be. And you always have to look at looking for veteran players, established players. At the same time, you have to balance salary, you have to balance age, you have to balance what our timeline is, how young our team is, and ultimately you plug all that into the equation and you come out with a decision. The decision sometimes may be passing on deals, and clearly that happens a lot, but what you have to do is flush them all out, and that's what we're trying to do now in the next 3-4 days.
I would think that you would feel you're in a very, very good positive position with a lot of options, because you've got the number 7 pick, the last pick in the first round, the number 30, and then 35, 52. Possibility of combining maybe perhaps the 30, 35 picks and moving up and getting another number 1 pick, I don't know, 21, 22, and so you get 2 players that you really covet?
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked about that concept quite a bit. But as you discuss it, what you have to balance that against is, do you like players at 30 and 35 just as much as you might at 20 or 23? So when you examine that possibility of consolidating those 2 picks and moving up, you have to have a finite goal. You have to say, we're moving up to 22, 3, 4 to get this player, X player. We're doing it for a purpose, not just to do it. Or then you balance that with, at 30 and 35, do we feel like we can get 2 players we like because we value those numbers just as highly as we do a pick in the early 20s? So as you go through the process, you talk about ideas, but then you drill down and focus on, what are we trying to accomplish here? We're not just trying to get off 2 picks to get 1. We're trying to get off these 2 picks because there's a player we believe is a difference maker that we won't be able to get at 30, that we have to move up to get. So that's the kind of work you're doing behind the scenes that we're doing with our group, and ultimately we'll make that decision.
You look at needs in a draft, you look at talent, you look at athleticism. This has been, historically, at least since I've been with the organization, a very poor rebounding team. And yet even last year, winning 23 games in the shortened season, the Warriors were well over 500 when they out-rebounded the opponent. Would you still like to get bigger? Even though you've acquired Andrew Bogut, do you feel like that's a need that you'd like to get bigger and be a better rebounding team?
Yeah, we do. We clearly have to address the rebounding, and that's a personal frustration of mine. I hate that. I hate when we get out rebounded. I would give up shooting even in some respects. I think that has to be addressed, and it has to be addressed, if not through the draft, and we will attempt to address it through the draft, then in free agency. And we think we've addressed it with the roster, with Andrew Bogut as well. But rebounding, and you played, and you know, if you get out rebounded night in, night out, it's probably going to mean you're going to be a losing basketball team. And we've shown that, sadly. So I think addressing that is a primary goal of ours, and I think it's something that every time we look at the decisions we have to make, we focus on, we have to become a better rebounding team.
I look at this club, and I've seen this over the last decade or so, probably the last 20 years. This team has scorers. The Warriors have ability to score the basketball. They've got a lot of shooters, great shooters. There were 4 players this last year that ended up in the top 20 in 3-point field goal percentage. And I know you talk about assets and reading between the lines. You're not necessarily going for a need sometimes too, but would you like to get a more athletic player? Like, let's say this is a remote possibility. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, not a great shooter, but he brings intensity to the floor, and you get an athletic player who could bring that kind of energy.
Yeah, I think, look, every team needs a balance of offense and defense, and if you look at the categories we were successful in, it was shooting, offense, and the categories we struggled in were defense, like we mentioned, rebounding. So if you can counteract some of your strengths and address weaknesses, you certainly look to do that. A player like Michael Kidd-Gilchrist is obviously renowned for his defense, toughness, effort, competitiveness, all attributes that you'd want on any team. Even if you have it, you can never have enough of that. But again, we are a team that has no trouble scoring, which is pleasing to the eye. You like to see guys make shots. At the same time, and you've witnessed it many times, as have I. When the shot goes up and we can't corral the rebound, to me that's the most frustrating thing, to give up an offensive rebound. And I think, again, you want players, when those 50-50 balls are there for the taking, that you're getting them. And the player you just mentioned, that guy, if it's between him and somebody else to get the ball, he's probably going to win that battle. And the more of those type of guys you can have, I think the better off you are.
Well, good luck in the draft, and I really appreciate you sitting down with us today and sharing.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
Okay, Bob. For Bob Myers, this is Jim Barnett for Warriors TV.